Representative, we could have you right at the big table. Welcome and good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of the school committee, and if we could all please rise and salute the flag to begin the meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Rostikowicz?
Here.
Ms. Scott?
Here.
Mr. Conway? Here. Mayor Elliott?
Here.
Mr. Gendron? Mr. Leary?
Here.
Ms. Martin?
Here.
6 present, 1 absent.
I did receive a text and a communication from Mr. Gendron. He is at a wake, which I think probably many or most of us will be adjourning to after this, but he's stuck at a wake, and he indicated he will be here as soon as he can, but it's a pretty long line. But this is a special meeting as a result of a motion filed by and approved by the committee by Ms. Scott, and the motion was to request the superintendent invite the state delegation to an ongoing semi-annual meeting to discuss district issues, including the impact of current and proposed legislation, and to receive budgetary updates to assist the district in short and long-term planning. So as a result, Madam Superintendent, we thank you for extending an invitation to the delegation who has joined us this evening, and on behalf of the committee, let me thank you for taking time out of your schedule. And I'd like to introduce who are sitting in the big chair, the big seat, State Senator Eileen Donahue, Representative Golden, and Representative Nangle as well. We do appreciate you coming this evening and sharing with us information on funding issues, MSBA issues, and we have a couple of other agenda items that we hope that you can shed some light on. So with that, I'd like to invite members of the State House delegation to offer comments, if you will. So Senator Donahue, Representative Nangle, and Golden.
I think I forgot how to operate the microphone, so thank you very much, and thank you to the school committee, the superintendent, assistant superintendents, and everyone here for inviting us. I think it was a motion, maybe from Ms. Scott, to have periodic meetings with the state delegation, and so thank you for that. I think it gives us an opportunity to come and share with you the issues that we're aware of, and also hear from you in terms of your priorities. So with that said, I'll turn it over. I know there are a number of issues that are on an agenda, but we certainly don't need to be limited to that if there are other things that you want to discuss. But I'll certainly turn it over to Representative Nangle and Representative Golden.
Sure. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for having us here this evening. Hello to everybody, and I'm glad that we're sitting down here tonight. I think it's very helpful to the delegation as well as the school committee and the city council, and most importantly, the residents of Lowell and the children of Lowell. So I look forward to entertaining any questions that you may have of us, anything that we can answer, or answers that we may not have, and we can get the answers too. So thank you for having us here tonight as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Representative. Representative Golden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and echoing the comments of my colleagues, thank you very much to the committee for inviting us here today. I think that the open communication is a great piece, and looking to move forward. Thank you very much.
Great. Again, thank you. We know how busy you are and how long the days are. So we're grateful that you're able to join us tonight and shed some light, and I'm sure there'll be some questions that you can perhaps gather information for us. So we put together a short agenda, if you will. So if we could, by way of the agenda, just maybe touch on some of these items and begin with the MSBA, Mass School Building Assistance Program. As you know, the city did submit applications, an application for financial assistance, particularly for the new high school. So with that, if there's an update, if you could shed some information on the MSBA progress perhaps any status update you may have.
Sure, I know Representative Nangle, you had a conversation regarding the MSBA progress?
Yes. Actually, we were reaching out to Matt Donovan with the MSBA, and we were also in contact with Jack McCarthy. And Eileen and Tommy and I have met with those two individuals over the last year and a half, on a regular basis, 2 to 3 or 4 times a year, I might add. They're very much aware of the situation here in Lowell. They're very much in favor of doing something here in Lowell. Having said that, there is just still no definitive answer as to which way. Let me explain first when I talk about this. I'm talking about the high school, if I may talk about that first, which I think is the main ticket item, if you will. And they're reviewing all the documents that they have received. They're going over everything. And ultimately, it was explained to us at a meeting that basically they review everything, and we might say we would like to renovate the high school, or we might say we want to build a new high school. The decision ultimately comes down to those individuals. They're going to find out the best way to spend the dollar. So unfortunately, we don't have a definitive answer yet as to which way they're leaning and which path they're going to choose to go down. They're also very much aware of the influx of students in the middle schools as well, and we're also aware that we do need some assistance there as well in the city. So they're just still, to our knowledge, just taking all the data in and reviewing it and going over it. But at this present time here this evening, we do not have a definitive answer as to which avenue they're going to go down.
Great. Mr. Lear, if we could just, I apologize, Madam Superintendent, I should have opened and asked if you have thoughts and comments on any of these items. So if that's okay, Mr. Leary, I just wanted to recognize the superintendent.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your consistent support. Whatever comes across my desk, we forward things back and forth all the time, so I want to thank you for that. But as far as the MSBA is concerned, your advocacy has really been out and above. You brought them here last fall, and we want to thank you for that. I think that it's difficult for all of us because we're all waiting. We know that, and Senator Donahue confirmed, what Mr. Lang shared here on the floor, that it's going to be November or January, and they know Lowell's the project, and these people make sure that they keep that going as well as us calling. So I want to thank you for that. And what I did on this agenda was just items that have always come up where people are saying we should contact the delegation, and just to get above board and talk about it, because we're doing the same work and sometimes we don't always close the loop. So I think it's a great motion, Ms. Scott, and thank you very much for bringing it forward.
Mr. Leary and then Mr.
First, Representative Nangle, thank you very much, and thank you to the delegation to sit down and have that conversation, because we were concerned from the standpoint of what we thought was going to happen. They would come out here and at least meet with us. But I think, we've received that, I guess, through Mr. Lang telephonically, but we appreciate your involvement with it, because your backing of what we're trying to achieve is very important. And what you've done so far, I want to personally thank you for doing it. So we appreciate you keeping us in the loop, and anything you can do to move that project forward is obviously advantageous for not only the schools, but the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Representative Golden?
One of the challenges, just to follow back up, is the number of applications that have been put forth. There's, according to MSBA, there was 227 applications that were put forth, and we spend statutorily $500 million a year. So we do have a long road to hoe here. I believe, I was just talking to the senator, and they're meeting again in November and then again in January, which is the time we're going to at least start to hear. So I would anticipate hearing something from MSBA sometime in January. Now, that being said, in speaking to those folks, they've agreed that they will come out, if necessary, if you folks would like them to at some point, to have a further discussion of your thoughts, and that could happen sometime sooner rather than later. Maybe we can have that discussion with the mayor or the vice chair or whatever the case may be tomorrow. So that's something you folks want to think about. That's been offered to the delegation from MSBA to give to the committee. They definitely are very interested in hearing what you have to say, obviously, to see what needs to happen over at the high school. So.
Great, thank you, Representative Senator Donahue.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to follow up, as Representatives Golden and Engel have stated, this is something that we've been in contact with the MSBA on a regular basis. I think there was a meeting last month, but they didn't take up any of these statement of interest applications, despite the fact that there have been many. And as we've talked about before, our competition is whoever is in that round of funding. And so none of those that we're in competition with have been considered by the MSBA yet at their board meetings. And as Representative Golden said, it's possible in November, but more probable in January. So, and then another question I think that came up is whether or not they needed to do another site visit of the high school, and we've been told that they do not have to come back out. They were here in the fall of 2013, and in light of that, they don't, at least their team doesn't need to do another site visit. That doesn't mean, as Representative Golden has said, that they won't. The representatives from Mr. McCarthy and his team wouldn't meet with the school committee and school administration. So we can certainly coordinate with the superintendent if there's a desire, but there isn't a need for another site visit.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Nagel?
I think Representative Golden mentioned that there was a $500 million allotment of money put into this. If I'm correct, I don't know if Tom said this, was it 249 or 270 something applicants this year? And it was explained to us, I think, which was a positive in one meeting. I mean, they didn't come right out and say it, but they receive all these applications, and a lot of them just kind of get pushed aside because they really look through them thoroughly to determine the need. And it was kind of conveyed to us that they realized the need here in Lowell. Not to get hopes up or anything, but of the 250 applicants, let's say there were roughly in there, X amount are just going to get thrown out because certain towns are just putting in for them for whatever the reasons may be when we actually have a need. I'm not saying these other towns don't have a need, but I just think the way I took that coming out of that meeting was they were very respectful and responsive to our needs here in Lowell.
Very good. Mr. Conway? You may want to switch mics, if that's okay. Right. Let's give that one. You broke it already.
I didn't touch it.
There we go.
Is that better?
He's got it. The
Well,
executive producer says he can hear you now.
All right, Mr. Leary can hear me. Well, now I'm happy. Again, I want to thank Senator Eileen Donohue, Representative Tom Golden, and Representative Dave Nangle for being here tonight. Because again, you people obviously have an extremely busy schedule, and I think it shows the school department and the city of Lowell that, as we all know, that you're certainly very willing to help out in any way at all. The MSBA, I would like to say that when you ask about whether we'd like a meeting or not, I think what's important to keep in mind is that you people, I think, have the pulse of what's going on down there because you discuss these situations. These are the people that you live with, shall we say, in your job. And I think that it's important to take your guidance in regards to that. So again, I thank you very, very much for being here tonight, and I look forward to this project and other projects going down the road. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to all of you for joining us this evening. I agree with what my colleague has just said in terms of kind of moving forward based on your recommendations. I would say that when you were kind enough to advocate for us, for the city, and get us all down to the State House to have the meeting. It was a while back now when we were first having this conversation. I thought that it felt for me as a school committee member like a really effective exchange of information, both certainly from our side. We got a lot of great information at that meeting, but it certainly felt that the representatives from the MSBA were open and I think, as you've said, Representative Dangle, they're aware of the challenges that that we face here in the city. I would say again, as Mr. Conway mentioned, deferring to what you think is the best course forward. But I would say if they are making the offer to come and meet both with you and with us, perhaps whether it's here or whatever's most convenient. I found that to be a really effective exchange, and if it was an opportunity that you think would make sense for us to kind of take advantage of, I think that we'd certainly, as a committee, be very interested in that again. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? If we could, I think we've concluded discussion on that item, and we appreciate the update, knowing how important that project is. And while we did submit the paperwork quite some time ago, it's always good to know that even though we haven't heard anything, that's not a bad thing. So the next item we have is a discussion on the funding formula for newcomer and early language learners. These two areas have become a significant cost to the school system, especially the unpredictability of knowing when and how many students are coming, and the ability to accommodate these students. We have already the Rogers School is being occupied. We're using the classroom space in that building, as well as Madam Superintendent. Did you want to chime in on the significance of new students coming and the impact that it has on the school system and the funding issue with the formula?
Yes, thank you. Since I have been superintendent over the last 4 years, the influx of newcomer students has been extraordinary. And so the very beginning of this year began with a motion from the City Council, which was forwarded to me, to ask for a cost effectiveness. What does it cost actually? And for every newcomer class that we set up, it's about $115,000, teacher, paraprofessional, to set up for the whole classroom. And so over the last 3 years, this committee has expended $1,350,000 more. But there's not a formulaic piece that comes with that. We get Title III money, which is probably $300,000 in that area. And when you come down to it, it's probably $170 per student. Truthfully, for as much as we have done studies to see what our enrollment will be, it's very difficult for us to stay ahead of it. And this committee, in the last budget cycle, approved 3 newcomer classrooms, and they are on the state in the high 20s. And so we want to stay ahead of it. We do not know. The federal government does not give us information about what, in fact, will be coming. It's not even the refugee status. We just can't measure who's coming here and from whatever country. And we welcome our students, but the funding is not adequate for what we need. And we will be found, and I'm going to be really honest with all of you, in non-compliance with the ability to give the ESL support, because we have growing numbers in our special education areas, as well as English language learners. So the reason why this is on the agenda, and I know that all of the delegation got a copy of these reports, as did the committee that went to the council, just so we say what kind of formula what can happen to make this equity in cities like Lowell, and it's all the urban centers that fight this. We have lots of issues. We have things we haven't added to regular ed, so it's an issue. And that's why, because it keeps on coming around, we need to talk to Congresswoman Songus, as well as this delegation, for your support.
Ms. Martin, could you take the chair, please?
The chair recognizes Mayor Elliott.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. As the maker of the motion from the City Council side that requested the information from the superintendent, I think the superintendent hit all the poignant parts that we're looking at. It's the unpredictability, and how do we afford it, knowing we even tried to anticipate this year with 3 new classrooms and moving administrative offices to try to anticipate the newcomers. And it's not the students' fault when, in its mid-year, I think we see a trend sometime in July. We start seeing quite a few number of students enrolling. So how do we predict that? It's virtually impossible, as the superintendent said, in the last 4 years. Are we looking at 700, over 700 students just in the last 2 years?
In the last 2 years, over the last 2 years.
So it's virtually impossible to run a sound school system, knowing every year you're looking between 300 and 400 new students. How do you plan? How do you predict? How do we afford it as a city when we're looking at, as the superintendent indicated, $115,000 to start classroom? And what is the residual effect that plays on how do we relocate or shift other students into classrooms? We're approaching 27 students in the classroom. I think that is an average, and that's a staggering amount. So, I don't know what the solution is. The reimbursements are based upon our student report at the end of the year, but I'm wondering if there's a factor that can be included in that formula, knowing, can we anticipate 300 students, 400 more students, and can DES look at trying to factor in those numbers? And I don't know, I'm sure we're not the only community that's experiencing this growth, but I think we are one of the communities that are probably experiencing a pretty significant higher ratio of growth. So I don't know if there's any thoughts on that, Senator?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. This is a really difficult issue. As the superintendent said, the funding comes from a couple of sources, both federal, in terms of Title III, certainly as it pertains here. And I think, in particular, cities like Lowell, and we have some statistics for Lawrence and Fitchburg, and the same struggle. The funding formula, just by way of background, looking at the Title III, and the state sets aside 5% of the federal award. And so the federal award is made, plus the immigrant award for anticipated new charter schools, and then it allocates remaining monies for consortium. And so the funding for FY15 is based on the data from March 2014. And the data collection is the ELL and immigrant counts in eligible districts. So if your numbers are going up every year and you're basing your funding allocation on the numbers from last year, you'll never catch up, right? I mean, that's part of the challenge here. And then the adjustment of funding for a city and town due to increased number of children of immigrant families is set, again, from the beginning of the year and doesn't change until the following year. So, and then we go when the formula is revisited again. So there are 2 sources of funds, Title III, and to support ELLs, and I know the superintendent and her staff know this better than anyone. And then the money for the immigrant under Title III is not the same as ELL students as well. So I think one of the problems we face in the state is we're, processing the federal funds where the formulas are based on a year before. The only thing that and I know there's been efforts and discussions from the gateway cities that are most impacted, is what can we do with our own state funding to lessen that burden. We've had discussions around legislation. We've supported legislation through the budget process. It doesn't see the light of day, but I think it doesn't mean we'll stop advocating for it. I think on the short term, that's the only thing we can really come up with in terms of those affected cities. And as I said, I can look and see the numbers from other gateway cities and how they're being impacted. Very similar to Lowell. The numbers are just way off kilter from what you're actually dealing with in that academic year. And there's just no way of making up the shortfall, because next year, even though, the numbers are based on the prior year, the numbers don't go down, and they haven't been going down. So You know, from a state perspective, because the Title III and the monies we're talking about are federal, we could try and advocate by filing legislation that would benefit those cities based on a formula in terms of increased numbers and try and gain the support of our colleagues. I mean, that's, you know, that seems to be, we're not going to change the federal fund formula or the, you know, calculations, but we can try through our budget process to advocate on this really important issue.
No, and that's where we are as a district as well. Not only the planning process, but we're getting to the point where we are bursting at the seams, where we have classrooms approaching 27, 28 students, and we're utilizing schools that once were closed. And where do we go with students at this point? We know we can't turn them back. We should be educating. We want to do that. But from a logistical and financial perspective, how do we manage this? And, you know, this year, I don't know what we do next year. I mean, literally, at what point do we say we just literally can't put any more students in the classrooms, A, affecting the quality of education for existing students, and B, where do we go? Representative Nangle mentioned a good point. We know in the next couple of years, we have a significant problem in our middle schools, that we are short and shy, upwards of 36 classrooms. We're getting to a crossroads where we have a problem in the middle school, and now we have a significant challenge at the preschool, kindergarten, and first grade level as well.
A couple people waiting. Madam Superintendent?
Just a point of information, the support of this governor has been extraordinary, trying to get the money the governor's funding. But it's interesting, just a point of information, especially from a former ESL teacher. When you get the governor's money, it was only for summer school. So you got $400,000, $300,000. I could have hired 12 ESL teachers for the year. And so when you're doing that advocacy, you know, we will take the money any way it comes. And we had a great summer program. And I know there's summer lack, but when you're an administrator that says, I could have had 10 ESL teachers for that price for an entire school year, it does tie your hands. And I know that as you sit in all of the meetings that you sit in, you hear this, but that has been something that, as a person who has taught children who speak English as a second language, you just can't believe the difference in the impact if they had the full year. So some of it is how we have to spend the money, because I don't necessarily think that for the long haul it's always the best plan, but we do what we're supposed to do according to grant guidelines.
Representative Golden, and then Ms. Scott.
Thank you very much. I think it's, Mr. May, you bring up a good point, what the committee has done with the middle school, what Representative Dangle was talking about earlier. You guys are doing a great job at forecasting what the problems are going to be in the future. And I think one of the biggest problems with the ELL is we don't know what the problem is going to be tomorrow. And as the senator has stated, we're operating off of something that, information from last year. So I think that one of the other pieces that we're going to be discussing today is that full reimbursement of homeless children busing. I know that's a big issue as well, because we're not quite sure, you know, hopefully that doesn't happen, but it could be a possibility that next week we'll, you know, have 40 or 50 or 60 children who are found homeless because of a fire in some other location. So I think that the state needs to do a little bit better of a job, I think, at trying to get those funds to you, but I'm not quite sure how to do that, so we're all ears.
Ms. Scott?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the members of the delegation for coming tonight. You mentioned that there was legislation that's been filed for the funding changes. Has there been a movement towards changing the single count date for funding?
I had mentioned in the budget process, there have been amendments, not legislation per se, though there may have been, there's 7,000 bills, so I'm not sure. There could have been, but in the budget process, there have been amendments filed to try and particularly target this past budget, the gateway cities that are being impacted. Unfortunately, not all these amendments pass, but it doesn't mean we're going to quit trying to push the issue. I'm not familiar with the, any legislation as you have just mentioned, but in terms of the budget, that's one area that we can try and tackle.
Representative Nangle?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had a question maybe for the superintendent. Gene, in 2010, the Department of Education said that 1 out of 3 students in the city of Lowell had limited English proficiency, if you will. I'm just curious, in 4 years, is that number still the same as a approximate?
Well, we have 14,000 students and 4,000 limited English proficient. So, yeah, it's 1 in 3, actually, when you think about it. It's a third of our population. So it's more than 1 in 10 that grows, and that's all the way through beginners to almost ready to exit. But those are the children who are under our guise, roughly 4,000 students.
And the reason I bring that up is this meeting, the timing of this obviously is very helpful to us coming here in the fall. Obviously, we do our budget next spring, and this is really getting ahead of the curveball, if I may say that, because having known this now, and we're still in the same situation that we were in 2010, basically, and it's just something that we can work with DOE, and then when we're coming in and doing our budget amendments, and like you just mentioned, Kim, different formulas and different ways that we can try to do things, this is helpful to us. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
So if we could kindly move on to the next item, we have, I'll refer to the Madam Superintendent, who has some information on expanding opportunities for early childhood education. Madam Superintendent.
Thank you. As you all know, Lowell has been a long-term leader as far as the early childhood council. And as a community, we've looked at the birth through grade 3 alignment process. And recently there was a meeting on Friday, 2 weeks ago, I believe, that was looking at access for students. And so another one of Governor Patrick's initiatives has been trying to fund preschool for children. But out of our 1,300 kids, I just want to make sure I have the data correctly, 1,300 children are enrolled, but 575 do not have a structured pre-K experience. That doesn't mean they may have daycare, but as far as access to educational input in their lives. So as the mayor has been very supportive, as well as just looking at how does Lowell, a community that always plans ahead, start looking at, as you did, the 10-year plan for homelessness and how you eradicated the gang kind of awareness in the city, and how do we look ahead to say, how can we do better every year? We do have some good news. Today, a few hours ago, there was a grant we had chosen out of 5 districts in the Commonwealth to have gone to a race to the top grant that's multi-million dollars over 5 years, so that would help. But I think that no matter what the result of that grant, we need to have an active plan beyond just the school department of what we're going to do, because it takes all of us. We have such wonderful community partners that are allowing a great early childhood experience. It's just that exposure. And so that's what we've been talking about for almost half of our students don't have that academic, and you will definitely be challenged for beyond grade 3 when you don't have that early start.
Senator Donahue.
Thank you. This is a really huge issue, I think, for the city of Lowell and for other communities. So in this fiscal year, there was an increase in early childhood ed. I think we went up 15 million in terms of over and above last year, which was a help. but it's still many, many millions short of fully funding early childhood education. I'll share with you a story that, first of all, I was stunned at the numbers in your kindergarten, in our kindergarten. I went with the superintendent at the beginning of the school year, and I'm going back to when I was mayor, 98 and 99, 2000. If we had a class of 800 or so, that was a huge class. You're looking at upwards of 1,300 kids in the kindergarten class. It's stunning in terms of the numbers. And then when you add to that the number who have not had any preschool, the challenges you can imagine are huge. But the story I wanted to share is this. On the higher ed subcommittee that I sit on, we did an oversight hearing with college presidents, and we talked about that kids are going to community colleges not prepared for school, and they are taking remedial courses, and this gap of being college ready. And one of the questions, it's just, when you have 66% of the kids taking remedial classes in math and science, it's like, this doesn't make sense. What can we do? How can we do a better job? And the college presidents, one started and they agreed, fully fund early childhood education. And they said, it doesn't make sense maybe that we're not advocating give us more money, but what we're telling you is when they start school and they're behind, they stay behind all the way through. So it's so important in terms of fully funding it. I know there's some price tags that have been thrown around. I know, the next Governor Patrick has been supportive, but it's costly. It's probably a couple of $100 million to fully fund anyway, as far as the numbers we can see. Not to be political, but I know one of the candidates for governor has advocated fully funding early childhood education, and I think they've tagged it at $150 to $200 million. But so that would be the dramatic change. But in the meantime, it is something that we've been advocating for in the State House as far as getting more money. And this year we succeeded at getting $15 million and then another $20 million for early childhood care.
Thank you very much.
Representative Holden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. As the Senator was saying, this year we set aside a separate line item, and it was birth to preschool, and that's the $15 million that was being discussed. And I think the good part about that is the State House and the House and the Senate is starting to recognize and realize that all the research is in, everybody knows this, we're not telling anybody any secrets here, that early education is 100% crucial. And I don't know if that's me touching this, I swear to you I'm not, but no. I don't know if it's, it seems to only be snapping when I'm on here, but, I don't know. Did,
Conway did something to it.
Mr. Conway break this? I don't know. But, Mr. Leary, thank you for not saying what you said earlier. But I think that everybody realizes that this is extremely important, and to go off with the numbers that the Senator was just talking about, there was a time, and I'll say Ed Reform Act of 1993, which none of us were there at that time, but that type of money wasn't spent in education, and it is today. I mean, the Chapter 70 now is $4.4 billion, I believe, and this is something that I think you're going to see the State House as a whole start to really rally around and start moving forward on this money. But I think it's important that it's been broken out into a new line item. Because now it's going to show every year, are we going up, are we going down when it comes to what I'm saying, birth to preschool.
Very good. Ms. Martin.
Thank you very much. Certainly couldn't agree more. I mean, in terms of recognizing the importance of early education on the children who participate, not to mention, as they move forward in their lives. And for families, families really come to rely on the offerings of early childhood, whether it's for daycare so they can continue working, whether it's that they recognize their children need the socialization and all the educational supports. I think what's unique about this specific issue, and the superintendent, I think, intimated at it, this is something that is certainly a school department issue, but it goes far beyond the walls of the Lowell Public Schools. We are, I think, very lucky that we do have mechanisms in place and groups in place that include all of our community-based organizations that do this work. And to have been included in that most recent grant award, I think is really, speaks really well to the kind of partnerships that we have in the city. And I just think as you're looking at these budget line items and looking at the way they're being kind of the money gets kind of tossed around in different lines, sometimes in a very creative way, I suspect, that it really does tie in with all the early education, or, EEC money, as well as the elementary and secondary education money. And I agree, having it as a separate line item does at least allow us to look at it as a discrete thing, but it's important that we don't spend it that way, that it's something that comes into the city as a whole and is kind of, works with the school department, but also includes that whole, the whole landscape of individuals who are doing this important work in a lot of different ways throughout the city.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Representative Nagel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just sitting here thinking, the House Chairman of Ways and Means happens to be geographically very close to us, just down the river in Haverhill. And I know that the Speaker and of the House, Robert DeLeo, and also Brian Dempsey, who is the House Chairman of Ways and Means. I've had several conversations with Brian about this over the last couple of years, and it's very important to him in the sense that we increase this funding. We've had these opportunities to speak to him, and the good thing with that is Haverhill and Lowell are similar in size and population, I guess, or whatever, and close there. So it's good in the sense that we have Chairman Dempsey just down the street here, someone that we can advocate to. Obviously, over on the Senate side, Senator Donahue is working with, there's going to be some changes over there on, obviously, with President Murray leaving, and there'll be a new House Ways and Means chairperson coming in. So there'll be changes, and we can just only hope that the person that takes over the House Ways and Means and the Senate Ways and Means shares the same views. Maybe it's someone from a large city like Lowell or Haverhill, and what's that? Or it could be, yeah, right, excuse me. I'm not supposed to say anything, but maybe, you never know. But, gee, did I kind of let the cat out of the bag? No. There's a little son over there, Eileen, she's listening. But anyways, Brian Dempsey this is something very important to the Chairman of Ways and Means, and he will be back next year, and it's something that we can speak to him about again. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Representative. That was a nice little cat you let out of the bag. Let's hope it comes true. So moving on to the next item, if there's any more information or discussion on this one. The next agenda item we touched on a little bit earlier regarding funding, and that's increased funding for access full reimbursement for homeless children busing. Ms. Rossiger, would you like to speak on this?
Thank you. So I bet you didn't know this was mine, right? So I want to thank you, just as my colleagues have, for coming here this evening and sharing your time and knowledge with us. So this is not, I suppose, not just about busing homeless children from shelters and/or shelter motels to their schools of origin, but it speaks to a larger issue, and how our families, we have so many families homeless families coming out of the Boston area, which pushes out into the Merrimack Valley, into the South Shore, Metro West, which then in turn pushes our own families out towards, central and western Massachusetts, which becomes very prohibitive, in a cost, in a cost-wise. So last year, Mr. Lane can probably give us an exact figure, but we were a few $100,000 in the red on our transportation budget. We spend a lot of money on transportation every year to provide these services for 14,000 children in the school district, and to have us being in such a significant deficit is a real problem. And the reimbursement on that is somewhere around 50%. That's egregious. And this is not just a problem that we as a city face, but every other community has to face. Really, it's an unfunded mandate. The federal government tells us that we have to provide busing, which I'm all for, because we need to have these children schooled in their districts of origin. But on the other hand, you know, there has to be some relief provided to our communities so that we're not, you know, robbing Peter to pay Paul. Mr. Lay?
I'm sorry, Senator Donahue.
I think we all agree. You know, of course, again, it sounds like we're passing the buck, but it is a federal, the McKinney-Vento Act that requires the busing, and, you know, all well and good, but the funding isn't supportive of it. The state has had a goal to fund it 75% reimbursement. Unfortunately, it hasn't. There's been a cut over the past couple of years, and this fiscal budget was level funded from the fiscal budget before. There was a lot of advocacy during the budget process, I can assure you. Communities that you'd be surprised that, you know, are saying that, you know, they're being, you know, impacted greatly. And, you know, West Springfield, for instance, was one that was advocating, you know, mightily for, you know, complete reimbursement, or at least get to the 75%. Again, it's an item that has a support. Budgets, you know, have their limitations, as you know, but it's a serious issue, and it's taking money out of districts so that they can't, you know, put money in the classrooms. It's one that you're preaching to the choir. We all agree that we need to fully, at least meet the goal of at least 75%, and we haven't done that this budget yet either.
Thank you, Senator. Further discussion on this item? Moving on to the next item for discussion, and that would be increased funding for special education, lowering the circuit breaker threshold. Ms. Rosikowicz, did you want to speak on this item? Did you want to speak the next item, Ms. Rosikowicz, on the increased funding for special ed, lowering the circuit breaker threshold?
For obvious reasons, I put this on. We spend a lot of money on special ed. All of our communities spend a lot of money on special ed. Where more, I suppose, larger cities such as ours are more impacted by those expenses. I mean, we've approved warrants for upwards of $300,000 for special education for children. It runs a broad spectrum. And I understand that at a certain point, it was the threshold where, you know, we would get the reimbursement for the remainder, but there are so many of those children that fall into that sort of mid-grade where we don't get the reimbursement, and that, again, takes away from other children in the school district who could really utilize those dollars for, you know, for other services.
Thank you, Ms. Rosikowicz. Mr. Leary?
Just to give you perspective, just use round numbers. We get, what, $12,000 per pupil. The deductible, I call it a deductible, because basically it goes up to $41,000 before the circuit breaker kicks in. So we've got to make up that difference. And for like the warrant that Ms. Rosikowicz was talking about, you're talking $300,000. So we got to make up the difference, about $30,000 before the circuit breaker kicks in. And then the circuit breaker, interesting name, circuit breaker, before that money kicks in from the state, it caps out at a certain dollar value. So we're making up the difference, and I don't remember the dollar value. I have to say it's $100,000. So you're making up $41,000 to the $100,000 or percentage of that. Then we're picking up the difference. Now there's not 100, you know, children that go up to $300,000, but there's a lot that fit in between 12 and 41 that we've got to find a way to fund it. And we're not the only community that's in that situation. So it's a challenge financially. I'm not sure if some of the smaller school districts, like real small, actually get reimbursed 100%. But districts like ours, or like maybe say a community like Peabody with 50,000 in it, some towns like that, they're being impacted significantly. I think our budget right now is, what, $8 million for special ed costs right now? That's a lot of money, and as we grow, and I don't know what you can do about it, but we got to realize that it's a problem across the board for other communities as well.
Thank you, Mr. Leary. Representative Golden?
Conway broke mine, so I don't know what's going on there. I think that you're going to get the delegation to agree 100% with you. This is something that obviously is important. All of these items are extremely important. We're being pulled in different ways just simply because of the revenues coming in or the revenues not coming in. So I think that, I won't speak for my colleagues, but special education, I think we've made a concerted effort over the years to bring it back up, to try to get to that 75%. I think that there was a number that is in my head, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure, I think Jay could tell me. But I think it's something that we need to do, and it's something we're going to continue to look at. I think that we're completely in favor of doing it. It's just, when we're looking at trying to fund, say, people just look at educational funding as just Chapter 70, period. They don't look at necessarily, the transportation piece. They don't look at the full access of homeless, children busing. And these are all line items that are important for us to continue to hear about, I believe, where we know that it's vitally important. So I don't want to pass the buck, and I don't think my colleagues do either, but it's always a revenue issue on our side as to how much more we can put into education. We can sit here all day long. We agree, I agree, 100% that early education is absolutely, paramount. And, well, if we can't get the kids there, spending all the money in the world on early education is not going to work. So.
Very good. Senator Donahue?
Just, I guess more of a request, maybe the superintendent or Jay can provide us with a breakdown, especially to the numbers that, Mr. Leary was just mentioning, as far as, so that we can take those back and digest them, because sometimes it's a matter of crafting either legislation or amendments that will try and assist that. So it would be helpful if we had the specifics.
Yeah, I can actually send you a memo just so you'd have some kind of talking points. But just to give you a general sense, I do think the legislature's done a good deal of trying to fully fund, what they say, fully fund circuit breaker at the 75% level, which is a little misnomer, because you'd hear fully fund and you'd think it'd be 100%, but fully fund always meant 75%. And I think for the current fiscal year we're in now, the reimbursement level is 72%. So it's very close to that 75. And the district is responsible for picking up 3 times the foundation budget number, which for Lowell is about $41,000. So we're on the hook for the first $41,000 directly of any cost for a special education student that needs to go to an out-of-district placement. And then anything over the $41,000, the state picks up 72%, and we pick up the remainder. One of the snags, like the homeless and one of the other funding formulas, is you've got that year delay. So whatever our actual payments for this particular fiscal year are, we submit them in May and June, and then that actually will dictate what our circuit breaker amount, the reimbursement, is for the following year. So from a budgeting standpoint, it's good to know what the number is to include in the budget, because you're pretty much locked in May and June with, you know what your expenses are going to be. But there's really not a lot of play with either children that move into your district after the school year gets started, children you might have in the district who are in programs who then need a more sophisticated program that we can't offer in district that have to go out. And then the other issue on circuit breaker, and I know if you've got a limited pool of funds and it's just a matter of how you disperse them, it's not really going to help you. But one of the costs that I know a lot of the school business officials have kind of lobbied for is transportation for for out-of-district placements is not eligible for a circuit breaker reimbursement. So it's only the direct tuition or the services that a student receives while they're at the school are eligible. But the transportation costs to send a child out of district are not. And there's certainly some of the placements that we have control over, because we're in a team meeting and we make a decision to place a child programmatically out of the district. But there are also those students where the state will step in, a DSS or someone will step in and actually make the placement that we don't have any control over. They then just come back and say, well, you're fiscally responsible at this point. Those are the budget busters that kill us, particularly during the school year, that is just so difficult to plan for and to react for, because we're already committed to a number. Again, if it's just a matter of if you're going to include transportation but not actually increase the dollar amount for reimbursement, everyone's going to have transportation costs. It wouldn't be that helpful. But I think a lot of times people just think, okay, the district is paying $41,000 and then you wash your hands of it. But it's really, you're still on the hook for the 25, or this year, 28% on top of whatever those costs are, plus the transportation, plus related services, things of that sort. So I can actually put together a little kind of bullet sheet for you and get it out to you within the next week, just so you have some talking points. But there's been progress, because there was a year, I believe, the reimbursement was closer to 50%, which was a killer for everyone. It is up to the 72, which is certainly good news. But it is just kind of a budget buster that we have to deal with every year.
Thank you, Mr. Lai. Further discussion? Was it the delegation? No. So the last item of the evening is a motion put on by Mr. Conway, and that's is there a plan at the state level to support control of infectious diseases and how the plan would impact the city of Lowell? Mr. Conway?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, for the next school committee meeting, I have a motion on asking the superintendent to sit down with the Lowell Health Director and also healthcare providers in the city, and invite them to come to a school committee meeting and present what is actually being done in the schools and what we can do further to make things as safe as we possibly can for our children, for our staff, and for the city. And I think it's something that's extremely important. I think that we obviously all have followed this on the national level and the international level, and I think that if when we're looking at this, we find that there are so many different discrepancies, what really scares people. And I've talked to parents, and there's a concern out there because they wonder, how is this going to affect their children in our school system? Is it going to filter into into our city? And, a lot of people might sit back and say, oh, it won't happen, it won't happen. Well, it does affect people. It affected my family a number of years ago. I had polio when I was 5 years old. And it was something that, it was a very difficult thing. I wasn't the only one. There were a lot of families in the city of Lowell that contracted it. I happened to be one of the very fortunate and very lucky ones, where many others were not. So I can be very sympathetic, obviously, to these parents that are reaching out and asking, what are we going to do about it? So when I found out that you people were going to be coming, I said, I wonder what are they talking about down in Boston? What is happening, or any type of information that you could present to us would be very, very helpful. Thank you.
Representative Nagel?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to Mr. Conway, I think it's a very good motion that you're going to be bringing forth before the school committee members. I was going to make a couple of suggestions first, and when you just talked about the DPH director here in the city of Lowell, Frank Singleton, you have a very capable man. I would suggest that you would bring Frank into the meeting. I would also suggest that, I believe it's a Dr. Sidebottom up at Lowell General Hospital that's in charge of the infectious diseases up there at Lowell General Hospital. And I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. And also, and you have a very capable individual here in the city as well, in Terrence Downs, over at Middlesex Community College. Terrence is the head of I believe it's the Homeland Security over at Middlesex. And in fact, I know he was on the radio this morning. I caught the last couple of minutes of it. And Terry is well versed in these, anything like this, in the Ebola. So my suggestion would be Frank Singleton, Dr. Sidebottom, and Terry Downs, if you can get all three of them here. What we're doing on a state level is, we were all issued a report at the beginning of October from the Department of Public Health. All the legislators were issued a report, which I suppose we could share with you if we, maybe we could do something, Mr. Mayor, to give you an actual copy of the report, or we could send it over to the superintendent tomorrow. But basically what they're telling us is, sure, everybody's alarmed, each one of us, and we'd be crazy not to. But they were saying there are no Ebola cases here in Massachusetts. Well, that was at the present time in early October. God forbid, we don't know what the future's going to bring. They say that we are very well equipped to handle any sort of a potential Ebola outbreak here in the event, an unlikely event, if that should happen here in Massachusetts. They have set up a website, which again will be all in the report that you can obtain. It might be helpful to the superintendent and all the committee members as well. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, there's something that you could really pay attention to. The Committee on Public Health, a joint committee in the House and the Senate, is having a meeting, having a hearing Tomorrow morning, I was just looking at 10 o'clock at the State House, and they're going to be having all sorts of experts come in, health officials, hospital leaders, and clinicians, anybody with experience in the management of Ebola patient care and infectious disease control. So I would watch that closely tomorrow. I'm sure it'll be a day-long event. It's open to the public if anybody wanted to attend. And you'll hear some of the experts, the EMS officials, the doctors, the infectious disease specialists will answer or testify to what they believe is happening here in Massachusetts. But at the same time, EMS and the hospitals and all the health facilities, how they would handle a potential case. I'm sure we all heard recently there was 2 issues that I heard of here in the city. Some may not know this yet. There was an issue up at Lowell General Hospital over the weekend. Some of you may be aware of this or not. But what I was able to find out in the interim, first of all, it was not a positive case, which thankfully it wasn't. And my understanding was that the EMS officials, I don't know if it was Pride Star or Trinity, handled it perfectly, is the way it was said to me by someone from Lowell General Hospital. The EMS officials, along with the officials at Lowell General Hospital, from the moment that the individual was brought into Lowell General Hospital to be checked out. So I felt kind of positive at the end of that conversation with someone when they explained that to me, that thankfully this person didn't have it, but just as important was the fact that they were well prepared. Here in Massachusetts, as we know, everything is down in the Southwest right now in Texas. But to know that our hospital here in the city of Lowell came up, in my opinion, extraordinary here, and handled this right from the initial get-go of the EMS officials that transported the person to the facility and the hospital. So I think that's kind of helpful to know that they are prepared. And I was actually told that, I think that's going to come out shortly, maybe in the next week or two, that you might hear this story, and the simple fact that the Lowell General Facility Healthcare, Circle of Health, thank you, Tommy, was ready and able to handle the situation. So hopefully we don't have any other situations here in the city, but it's just something that everybody's paying attention to, and we have to watch it with the utmost importance.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Donahue, and then Ms. Rosigowitz.
Thank you. And as Representative Nangle said, obviously the local hospital did an outstanding job. The Department of Public Health Commissioner Cheryl Barrett has been giving updates on a regular basis. I think one of the concerns, and this is a concern for everywhere, it's a global, situation, a very mobile situation, where people travel in a city like Lowell, where we have so many international students in in the schools and people living in the city. But one of the things that has been stressed in Massachusetts is 100% of the hospitals are asking travel questions when someone comes in. That is a standard procedure at this point. Someone presents at an emergency room with who is ill. They are questioned. It is documented what they've done, where they've been, where they've traveled. So that is being done, and that hospitals are prepared to handle a case. But it is a fluid situation. It's a work in progress, and it's something that is I think, as Representative Nangle says, the entire Commonwealth is on high alert. Although we're classified as low risk for Ebola, and this is coming from the Center for Disease Control, we are classified low risk. Nonetheless, I don't think anyone is taking any chances, and it will be something that is number one priority.
Thank you, Senator. Ms. Rosigowitz, then Mr. Conway.
So I appreciate my colleague's motion. I've been watching this with a great deal of interest. Texas, I suppose, was low risk at one point. So my concern in particular is what the state, the plans that the state formulates and how that trickles down to every single community and through our health departments and into our schools and our public institutions. Because humans aren't smart all the time. And they see something wrong or somebody's hurt, they rush to someone's aid. And so, I'm not trying to set the panic button, but, people react without thinking sometimes. So I think for us, as a state, it's going to take a lot of education, and it's going to have to happen fast, because everybody should be aware of what those plans are, what the protocols are. So that's just my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Conway?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, not just to concentrate on that one particular area, that Ebola, but we're also talking about the enterovirus D68. And that, as far as I'm concerned, is a very scary situation, because there are some cases that are coming up that are mirroring the polio situation with this paralysis. And to be honest with you, there seems to be a lot of confusion with that on why that's taken place. And it sounds like, when I'm listening to the doctors in this situation, that they think it's one thing, and all of a sudden now they're seeing something else. And I would assume, and I'm certainly not a medical person, but I assume that there's red lights going off saying, what is this, what is actually happening here? And I think that what my colleague just alluded to was the fact, and we've talked about it earlier tonight, we have 14,000 students here, and we have approximately 70%, or close to 70%, minorities. And many of these students, or not many, but a number of them, will go back and visit their original country, to visit relatives and friends and so forth, and vice versa, where you have relatives that are coming over and visiting their family over here. So when I sit down and I talk to some people, that it becomes almost a Herculean task. And as my colleague just said, I think every community is a little bit different. So that's why, again, we're talking about this, and I'm sure that there's going to be ongoing talks and discussions. But Lowell is a unique place, and I'm obviously concerned, and I want everyone safe. But I'm looking at those 14,000 students right now, and that is something that I'm certainly glad that you people are on top of this. And we need to get as much information as possible. I don't think there is enough of information that we can actually get on all levels, accurate information to make it a safer situation. So again, I thank you very much for sharing your information with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Conway. Madam Superintendent?
Thank you. I spoke to the Public Health Director, Singleton, this evening, and he told us about a meeting that will take place here in the Mayor's Reception Room, I believe, 3 o'clock tomorrow, along with the City Manager, that's really looking at the next steps for how we're going to do this information locally. And I would love to get some input from Assistant Superintendent Durkin. She has been working on a daily basis with the Health Department and the head of school nursing as a result, just if you want to provide any information. But I know tomorrow at 3, Mr. Singleton just told me that tonight at about 6 before this meeting.
Ms. Durkin?
Thank you. Let me just get a little closer.
I didn't break that one over there.
That was all me.
They were working fine. They were all working fine last night.
Representative Golden was going to jump right on it, so I might as well take it.
Ms. Durkin?
Thank you. I just wanted to let you know that I have been meeting regularly with the Health Department, and specifically with Lisa Gilbicki, who runs the school health unit for our students in Lowell. And I will be meeting with her again tomorrow. We work together on the enterovirus and getting information out to families throughout the whole school district. Within the last couple of weeks. We will continue to get updated information out. I know the report that you alluded to, Representative Nangle, because the two of us looked at that very early on. It came out several weeks back. And at that time, the recommendation from the state was that we shouldn't be putting out information to the schools yet, But as of today, the Health Department and Lisa Gilbecki, they did participate in a webinar with the CDC. They're planning another information session tomorrow. I'll be meeting with Lisa at 8:30 tomorrow morning so that we can provide some particular information out to the schools and to our families. The other piece that I just want you to know is that we're working on a protocol similar to the hospitals for our Family Resource Center, and with Lisa and the Health Department to determine particular kinds of questions that our staff can ask to ascertain if someone or a member of the family have been to a country that we need to be concerned about. And if that's the case, then we're going to have a link directly to one of our nurses for some assessment.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Durkin. I think that's very helpful, especially to the people at home, knowing what has been taking place, preparations, processes, and information exchange. And I did not know about tomorrow, Madam Superintendent. I'm sure we just got emails, but that will be that'll be very helpful and timely. So I'm sure the newspaper was glad to hear about that as well. So with that, on behalf of the committee, members of the state delegation, we want to thank you for your time this evening, but more importantly, we want to thank you for your tireless effort and support at the State House. We know the challenges are always great when it comes to finances, but we do know that we have members in both the House and the Senate working tirelessly on behalf of the school district, fighting for every penny that you can get. So we appreciate you taking your time, but again, more importantly, we appreciate all of your hard work on behalf of the students of the district. Members of the committee, Madam Superintendent, your staff, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I think this was a very productive meeting. We'll look forward to having them in the future as well. Entertain a motion to adjourn by Ms. Martin, second by Ms. Ross-Sikowitz. All those in favor signify by saying aye. And the opposed, motion carries. This meeting stands adjourned.